So let's talk about what we're going to cover throughout this course, Ethical Hacking. In this course, we're going to start off, number one of the first module, the Introduction to Ethical Hacking. I'm going to put a lot of emphasis on how important this first chapter is because we're going to discuss the methodology that you would want to pursue the same as the hacker is going to pursue in trying to penetrate into your network. What I'm talking about is that there's a methodology. It's not just a random pick. It's not just grabbing information out there and hoping that I got lucky with some company. There's a lot of research that a good hacker is going to be doing, a lot of methodologies that they're going to follow to find the best way to get into your network, and the odds are they're in your network because they chose you for a certain reason. In Module 2 we'll talk about footprinting. In footprinting we're trying to get as much information as we can. We'll even talk about fingerprinting. So the footprinting is going to be this research that we do, and then through the process of fingerprinting do our best to see if we can determine the types of systems and platforms that are running in your network so that I can then research all of the exploits, all of the O-Day exploits, and find out what I can to come after your network. In Chapter 3 we talk about scanning. So now that I've found these hosts or I found these potential targets, I want to scan them. That's where we start making noise, start rattling those doorknobs to see what services you're running, what ports you're listening on, all of the things we're used to seeing as we do our typical scan of our system logs, and find out that people are out there doing these scans all the time. In Chapter 4 we're going to talk about enumeration. And now that is a crucial part of what I want to do. In enumeration I'm going to try to convince your servers to give me their user account names that they have, including that administrator account. I'm going to ask them to tell me what network shares that they have, what processes and services that they're running, anything I can use to get through that system, to take advantage of it, to exploit it, and to be able to own it. In Chapter 5 we're going to take what we call system hacking and really lump into it a lot of different information. We're going to talk, of course, what it sounds like, how to hack into systems. We're going to talk about password guessing and dictionary attacks. We'll talk about rainbow tables and ways that we can try to do brute forces against passwords. But more than that, we're going to talk about how hackers will try to hide their tracks while they're there, ways in which they erase their event logs, the way that they might hide information in plain sight through steganography or alternate data streams. Then we're going to get into leaving that back door on that system. Once I've successfully hacked in, we'll talk about in Chapter 6 Trojans and other malware, these back doors that allow me to come back in again after I've already been in there. In Chapter 7 we'll talk about sniffers. In this case we're going to look about how we can passively and actively sniff the network traffic, looking for information, looking for data, looking for your passwords, for your logins, for whatever information is possibly out there for me to find. We're going to talk about ARP spoofing and ARP poisoning and be able to successfully make that happen in our switched network. In Chapter 8 we talk a bit about denial of service, kind of the sour grapes if you would. If I couldn't successfully get in, then I'm going to take the point of view, well, if I can't get in, no one's going to. Chapter 9, one of our shorter chapters, is probably the most important one. We're going to talk about social engineering. This is what's going to make the hacker something more than just a script kiddie. The ability to get on the phone, to get face-to-face, to be able to dumpster dive, to do all of these things that we can that involve no technology whatsoever and get information. You know, I could spend hours, days, or weeks trying to attack and get into your system and steal a password when I might get it in a 5-minute phone call. Obviously, I'd like the 5-minute phone call trade-off because it's easy, it's interpersonal, and it's so much simpler than having to go through all these other stealthy means to get in. So we'll certainly want to make sure that you understand the importance of that chapter. In Chapter 10 we're going to talk about session hijacking. And by talking about session hijacking we're going to show you that it's not the easiest thing in the world to do. But we will demonstrate it for you with a program called T-Site where we can take over a telnet session. And we'll talk about all that's involved in actually being able to successfully take over a session. In Chapter 11 we'll talk about how to hack web servers. And when I talk about web servers, I'm talking about the actual server themselves, not the application that they're running, not the database backend they're connected to, but the server itself. In Chapter 12, we'll talk about web application vulnerabilities. How good are your web applications? Can I, if I make a connection, put in malformed information and then actually get your back-end server to do something unexpected? Can I change the client-side scripting to work against you? Can I go to your site that sells golf clubs and buy them for $1? So those are the types of things we're going to look at in those vulnerabilities to see if we can have that happen. Then we're going to talk about web-based password cracking. In case I can't take advantage of poorly written web applications, I'm just going to try some of the same techniques to get a valid login to whatever site you have. As we're still in this genre of this web information, a lot of these are data-driven web pages. So we're going to see and talk about what SQL injection is, and can I legitimately send codes into your SQL server and have your SQL server execute code or queries or commands that you didn't think I should be able to do, using your web-based application as my tool for the attack. And then chapter 15 we talk about wireless networks. We'll talk about some of the differences between the different variations of wireless. Then we'll talk about some of the encryption and some of the ideas of things that we might do, looking for rogue access points, doing an analysis of where our wireless networks cover. And then in chapter 16 we're going to talk about intrusion detection systems, firewalls, and honeypots, and what we can do to try to get through those firewalls, evade those IDS systems, and then have a bit of information about ways in which we should analyze where we place those devices in our network. In chapter 17 we'll talk about Linux hacking, and mostly we're going to talk about using Linux as our platform to conduct our test or do the penetration test into our network. In chapter 18 we'll talk about buffer overflows, and we're going to see how easy it really is to be able to find certain exploits, and on those exploits send in the payloads that can be the commands that we want. We're going to successfully go after a Windows 2003 server with a buffer overflow framework called Metasploit, and you'll be able to actually do this yourself, following the steps that we show you, to be able to start testing your networks and whether or not you're susceptible to a lot of these exploits. And then in chapter 19, our final chapter, we'll talk a bit about cryptography. We'll try to give you an overview of the different models of cryptography and hashing, and we're going to talk about, through this section, what can we do to use how this process works to our favor to be able to, say, gather your information, your passwords, from your hashes stored in your SAM table. So we're going to talk more about rainbow tables and some of the tools that we use, like Cain and Abel, to be able to gain access, get that hash information, and then crack it with these rainbow tables. So all in all, it's going to be a great course. After you complete this course, you'll be prepared to take the Certified Ethical Hacker examination offered through the EC Council. In addition, you'll be able to sit and take the Certified Penetration Testing Specialist certification, or at least be prepared for both of those, the second one offered by Mile 2. You can find additional resources and information regarding the CPTS exam at Mile 2's website, which is www.mile2.com. With that said, I'm sure you're excited to begin your journey into the world of ethical hacking, and I certainly know that I am.